Good afternoon, everyone. I hope you are enjoying your almost nearly third week end to the semester and that you're having a wonderful experience with our students and engaging them in their learning. I know as a person teaching this semester, I'm enjoying them very much. So thank you for what you're doing for our students, and we're happy that you could be here to talk a little bit about our academic and research updates and reminders that we have. We have a number of key people here today, and we'll show that slide. There you go. Gary Durr, our Vice President for Operations and Safety. We have to have him here as he keeps us safe and healthy across the community. And Jay Dickinson, our Vice Provost for Academic Affairs and Student Success. She has some important academic updates for us as we walk through the semester. Kirk Dombrowski, our Vice President for Research, has some important information about research updates, and then Jim Vigoro is going to be talking to us a little bit about the National Center for Faculty Development and Diversity reminders and other faculty updates. So we're pleased that they could be here. We are recording this event. Today, Jay Dickinson is curating the questions. We're going to focus the questions that are related to today's theme, and we will get through as many as we can. We've been pretty good the last several events, and then we'll post the event and the Q&A each week afterwards. So I'm looking forward to hearing what our colleagues today have to say and to hear your questions. So why don't we start with Jay, who has a few academic updates for us. Go ahead, Jay.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to the third week of the semester. I hope it's been going well for everyone so far. I just wanted to remind you of a few important dates. Don't forget that in addition to March 2nd, which is town meeting day, we have 2 other reading or respite days built into the semester to give you and your students a chance to catch up. Please be aware that you should not be scheduling anything to do with your classes on those dates. Those are days for you and for your students to catch up. We have those upcoming on March 24th and April 15th. I also want to remind you that April 8th is the withdraw date for students, and we learned last semester it is really important that faculty be updating grades and be ready to issue those academic alerts as it becomes necessary for a given student. So as was outlined in the faculty digest last week, don't forget that you can use an academic alert at any time. And our student services professionals have asked that if you notice a student missing class frequently, having several missing assignments, or really struggling academically in terms of their grades on other assessments, please make sure to issue that academic alert, and it helps keep the advisors and the student services professionals up to date on which students may need additional attention or just reach out to make sure that everything is going okay for them. I also want to remind you that a call has gone out for proposals for travel study courses. There are some restrictions on what kinds of courses can be approved right now due to the timeline that is necessary to prepare for those. However, this week you can, if you didn't get that memo, we'll have a link to it in this week's Faculty Digest. So if you are interested in offering a domestic or international study abroad course that you've offered in the past, or potentially a new one, please make sure that you take a look at the expression of interest form that will be due March 4th. And those are the updates that I have.
Thank you so much, Jay, and thank you for the reminder about the academic alerts and travel study. Hopefully students are fully engaged and are contributing, whether in person or on Teams Live or online, for those of you who are teaching online. Okay, next we have Gary Durr. He's going to talk to us a little bit about how spring opening has gone and some testing updates. As you know, Gary and I both sent a memo yesterday to really give you some updates on what we're seeing, and he's just going to talk about some of the strategies that are working and we know will continue to work if we all stay diligent. So Gary, thank you once again, and your entire staff, for keeping us healthy and safe.
Thank you very much, Patty. And I hope that the message that Patty and I sent last night helped provide some additional context into kind of the current state of things around testing and cases on campus. We went into this semester fully realizing that we would see an uptick in cases. That's been consistent across Chittenden County, across Vermont, and across the greater Northeast. And we fully expected to see those on campus as well, too. As the really good piece of information that was included in last night's message was that the vast majority of our new positives, and that continued over the last 2 days, are coming from students that are already in quarantine. Now, that's really good news because what we've been able to do through contact tracing is to remove them from the community, get them into quarantine housing, and have them be there and not add an additional contact traces or people that we need to be concerned with there. I'm confident that if we continue that, that will continue to bring down our numbers. The other thing that I think is really important, and I applaud every member of our community this, we've been doing about 12,000 tests a week the first 2 weeks of the semester. We had really high degree of compliance with our day 0 testing and then the day 7 and day 14 test. And we've had really good numbers again this week. And I can't tell you how important that is for us to be able to stay ahead of the potential spread on campus. We pointed out in that memo, and I think it bears repeating, that university has done over 220,000 tests since we started this back in August. And that doesn't include our testing, like the pre-arrival tests that we've done both in August and in January. And that represents 23% of the tests that are done in the state of Vermont are all done on our campus. That enables us to know exactly where we're at very quickly. We are fortunate that we have a wonderful partner in the Broad Institute that have been able to support our testing demand. They added on additional capacity in January so that if we needed to expand our testing, we're able to do that as well too. As we also mentioned in the message last night, we have implemented the use of the rapid testing for antigen tests. And that is a really good screening tool for us for students who are symptomatic or even faculty and staff who are symptomatic, but we have to wait for that test result. We can administer that antigen test, the rapid test, get those results, make a quicker assessment, and then move that person into quarantine, whether it's an employee, whether faculty staff member, or whether it's a student. And that's been really a helpful strategy that we've been able to use in helping to continue to maintain control on that spread. The other thing that we've been doing, and I know some people have raised some questions about our isolation and quarantine space. We have adequate space right now. We have a great team that's managing that. We check in regularly on that to make sure that the needs of those students are addressed in a timely way to make sure that that experience is done as supportive as best. So with that, I would again say that thank you all for the great work that you've been doing in supporting our students in their efforts.
Thank you so much, Gary. And I know you also mentioned that we have some wonderful student ambassadors who had experienced quarantine and isolation last semester and then volunteered and asked how they could help and support the efforts this semester. So it just speaks to the integrity and wonderful contributions that our students want to make. And also, Gary, I understand the ice rink is pretty popular. Is that what you're hearing and seeing?
Yeah, I mean, and to your first point, it was so great when we thought about trying to come up with some some additional support for the students in isolation quarantine. We thought, well, let's see whether any of the students who had tested positive would be willing to do it. It's been remarkable to see their response. We had many of them apply. They've been great ambassadors. They've been great support for our students in there. The ice rink has been an overwhelming success. It is open 10 to 10 every day. We've got groups that are requesting to do programming on it, and it's a great release for students to be out there, having some physical activity, having a good time in a safe way, and we've had great weather for it. It's been very cold consistently. We haven't had a lot of ice management issues, but it's been a huge success, as have been our tents. We've had a lot of requests for groups to program in there. I think they like the new physical setup in there with the Adirondack chairs around tables and a more relaxed, welcoming setting than what it had been in the past. So those have been a success as well too.
Thanks so much, Gary. And I know as we talk to our experts on campus, I remember Jan Carney telling us, have them bundle up and get outside. And so I think the ice rinks and the tents, when I walk across campus to get my COVID test and I go into some of the tents, and students are really enjoying the setups of the Adirondack chairs where they can actually be out of their room, outside, but still warm, and have conversation or study or whatever. So thank you for all of those pieces. Before we go on to Kirk, I thought we would circle back to Jay because I meant to ask her. I know that there's been a slightly new approach to study space, and we've kind of created a study space map. And so if she doesn't mind, I'd like to ask her if she could talk to people about that. Thank you, Jay.
Thank you, Patty. So as you can see at the top of this slide, it's actually a really easy URL to remember. It's go.uvm.edu/study spaces, and it marks on a campus map where the new study spaces are. So just as with creating those outdoor spaces for people to relax, it was really clear to us that students needed smaller, more widely scattered, quiet study spaces around campus. And so you can see there's a whole list of those. The Waterman study space in Waterman Manor is not open this semester. However, there is space in the basement of Waterman, outside of Waterman Cafe, with tables and great plugs. So please invite students to use those, as well as the heated tents that are available on campus. All of these are open past regular hours into the evening for students to be able to get out of their rooms, get out their study, and the tents also have some social space in them as well. So please encourage your students to take advantage of these chances to get out and refresh their minds with a new location as they're doing their work and studying.
Thank you, Jay. I think this was an important step that we've taken, and it spreads it out. It gives students opportunities to be out of their room and study in a different location and actually see other people, but still socially distanced and masked. And the students have been very compliant every time I've gone to any of the spaces. So, and I'm seeing students out and about more than last semester. It feels good to see students finding their study spaces even in the basement of Waterman. And I'm so proud of the way that they continue to manage their social distancing but find a different place to enjoy their learning. All right, thanks so much. And now we're going to go to Kirk, who's going to give us some updates on research and what's happening in that arena.
Great, thanks, Patty. Yeah, a few things going on. We're sort of cruising along with our, we had a very busy January and February for proposal submissions. The busiest month that we've ever had since I've been here, so that was kind of exciting. We are also having great success with our Commit to Submit NSF Career Grant program. We had probably twice as many people sign up for this as we thought we were going to get, and we've had a tremendous amount of consistency. So even on the writing days, the between week sort of accountability sessions where you agree with a writing partner that you'll both sit and write. We've had 15 and 18 people showing up for those, and regularly almost 20 people at all of the training sessions. So huge success. I just am thrilled. You always worry that you'll throw a party and nobody will come, and especially when you're throwing an NSF grant writing party, but it really is working. So we are going to be rolling out a new compliance, conflict of interest, conflict of commitment process. The policy hasn't changed. What we're going to do is sort of expand out the click system that will be rolling out over the next couple of months. You'll see lots of training opportunities, both for folks who are monitoring commitments and for the folks who are going to be, for the faculty who are going to be entering their data. Most folks who are submitting federal grants are doing this already in Click, and this is designed to make our general reporting system much easier. You'll see that rolling out. We're standing up a new broader impacts hub in the Office of Research. This is a large national kind of program that's really aimed at making our research more impactful, reaching the audiences more effectively that we can reach, and so on. So we've been participating with ARIS, which is the national group. We have a part of our team going off to do that, and it's around sort of providing researchers with background material to do things like talk about what the workforce development implications are for your work, or how do you plan K through 12 outreach as part of your ordinary science projects, or distance learning and continuing education in the process of doing scientific research. All of these things, if you're writing federal grants, are high importance in terms of scoring. We haven't had a big emphasis on that here, so we have really spent a lot of time standing up this new hub. You should see that roll out within a month. We're revamping our internal competition process. So in the past, as you know, our internal competition process actually was a woman named Hilda who has retired. She was the process. She got all of the notices and she sent out all of the notices. We're going to try and do it a little more systematically in that way. So we're hiring in that space, but we're also creating a web link between Pivot, our grant search engine, where most of our information comes from in these areas, and our InfoReady review process. This will allow us to sort of have a much more managed, much more effective, lots more outreach in our internal limited entry and internal competitions for the kinds of awards we're often only allowed to submit one for. And then finally, we're down to making a selection on the new lab registry and project registry software. This was an observation that came out of our COVID response, that we really didn't have a single central lab and project registry platform. We tended to do chemical registry in one area. IRB had their list. Sort of almost every sort of compliance element, lab safety had their list, biosafety had their list, and so everyone had separate lists. And when it came time to try and sort of recognize and deal in the COVID situation with all of the things that were going on, we realized we didn't have a list. And so we've been cooperating with Gary's team over at Risk Management, who are fantastic, and we've narrowed it down to 4 platforms. We'll finish that review this week, and then sort of all of our reporting, compliance, and obligations stuff for lab spaces, for outdoor projects, and those kinds of things will all be in one place. It turns out to be much more complicated than you might imagine, because the fire department needs us to keep the list in certain kinds of ways and so on. So really happy that we'll have a professional system set up certainly by the end of the semester, and we're hoping by early April. So that's the updates. Lots of system progress this time.
Thank you so much, Kirk, for all your energy and putting all these operational pieces in place. And as someone who's still doing research, I have to say, I think I finally got UVM Click in a way that it's so efficient. Your staff is great. If they have a question, they do it. I go right online. So thank you for the efforts and also for facilitating so much engagement, especially with our junior faculty. Kirk, anything in terms of COVID influence on research? People are back. I know my students are in the research lab. We're just doing one student at a time and following all the protocols, but that is going well across campus?
We are, so far so good. So we're back at level 3, which has allowed our undergraduates to go back into the lab, and so you never want to say these things, so we knock on wood ahead of time, but we really haven't had any lab-based incidents, and so we've been really diligent, careful, and I think that we're really hoping that can continue. We're watching we meet 3 times a week to assess the community conditions, the lab conditions, the on-campus conditions, hospitalization conditions, everything that we can find, and really consider whether our activity level is appropriate to our risk level. And so far so good. So the more careful people are in their labs, the easier it is to keep everything open. So there's a plug for constant vigilance, as my kids would say from Harry Potter, right? I think that's the line.
Thank you, Kirk. I think that's Gary's and my mantra: vigilance, 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 and don't engage in social gatherings without masking and social distancing, and please don't travel unless you have to, and that you follow all the quarantine things, because we realize those are the top two reasons not being vigilant about social gatherings and travel has been the single biggest problem across the state, the nation, and certainly in our own community. Okay, last but not least, Jim Vigro is going to talk to us a little bit about some reminders and updates in the faculty space, and particularly the National Center for Faculty Development and Diversity. So go right ahead, Jim.
So thank you, Patty, and good afternoon to everyone. Let me start by making a couple of quick announcements. As you heard from Suresh a couple of weeks ago, Wanda Heading-Grant will be stepping down from her position as Vice President for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. So we are in the process of starting a national search for what will be a Vice Provost for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. We have an amazing search committee that's already rolling up their sleeves and getting ready to work. But we are encouraging you to also participate in this process. So if you know of someone who's interested, or if you are interested yourself in the position, or if you know someone who might be a good candidate for the position, please, feel free to pass that information on to me or to Leslie Parisi, who's the co-chair of the search committee. The other sort of a leadership announcement that I have is we're currently looking for a director for the Center for Teaching and Learning. And this is a great opportunity to lead a very capable and experienced staff team at the Center for Teaching and Learning. So this is a 10-month position, a part-time position, and I'm sure many of you are familiar with the wonderful programs that the CTL offers. So you received an email yesterday with the position advertisement and the description. If you have any questions about that, again, feel free to reach out to me, and I look forward to receiving those applications. So moving on to faculty development activities, they continue at full steam. We had a ramped up during the month of January. Certainly those activities will continue. And I want to call your attention to several upcoming ones that will continue throughout the rest of the spring semester. So if you're interested in exploring ways to increase student motivation and learning, there is a faculty learning community for that. If you're interested in exploring alternatives to traditional student grading, there is a book club and a faculty learning community for that. And if you're interested in carving out time for your own scholarly writing, like Kurt mentioned, there's group for the NSF career proposals, but there's also structured faculty writing groups through this Writing in the Disciplines program. So please take advantage of those as well. So in addition to these, obviously all the usual smorgasbord of workshops on, Blackboard, discussion boards, Teams, Yellow Dig, what have you, those will continue, as will the very popular bootcamp for online teaching. So check out the CTL website and the WIT website for details and how to sign up for these various activities. Now, speaking of carving out time for your scholarly writing, I encourage you to take advantage of our institutional license with the National Center for Faculty Diversity and Development. This is a resource that has lots of great advice and resources. They have an outstanding library of resources. And while it's mostly geared towards sort of the early career faculty, a lot of this advice is equally useful for more experienced folks like myself, and I'm sure like you too. So they have lots of little activities, including sort of what they call a 14-day writing challenge, which is essentially a supporting community that also helps to nudge you get that manuscript done or get going with your writing on a proposal or book or whatever it is you need to get right. The next challenge starts in March 22nd, so you have about a month to sign up for that. So take advantage of this. They also have a podcast series that is great. I kind of listen to it on my spare time. It's good when you're making dinner, or in my case, doing the dishes. But it's always useful to hear colleagues, describe their experiences on how they're navigating the various challenges, especially the challenges over the past year. So if you haven't activated your membership, it's pretty easy to do that. The instructions, you can find them in the Faculty Affairs website. It takes you about a minute to activate your membership, and the benefits are really phenomenal. So please do that. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jim, and thank you for helping us be a part of that National Center for Faculty Development and Diversity. I know a lot of faculty are taking advantage of it, and it's very helpful, and thank you for all the other updates. So the question and answers are now open, and I think, Gary, the first three are probably going to be for you, so get ready. The first question is, are the UVM positive case numbers included in the daily Vermont COVID positive numbers?
Yes, they may lag a day, but our Broad Institute reports them directly to the Vermont Department of Health, and they're included in the state report.
And the next question is, will there be any changes at UVM for quarantining guidelines after non-essential hire for individuals, faculty and staff in particular, who are now fortunate to be fully vaccinated?
Yeah, so I want to, and I'll post in the chat, the Vermont Department of Health has issued specific guidelines with regards to travel and people who've been vaccinated. So I'll look that up and get that posted, or we include it in the FAQs afterwards.
Perfect. And I know there's still some questions that people are trying to answer about that, and I believe in the next month we'll have more information about people who are vaccinated and what that means in terms of carrying the virus or transmitting it. And I believe our infectious disease expert, Beth Kirkpatrick, has talked to us a little bit about this, and maybe the next Faculty Teams Live, we can invite her and Jan because they have a lot of information in this area. So the next question, Gary, is what is the % positivity threshold for when UVM would pivot to all remote instruction? And I think you and I have talked about this a lot. It's not just about one thing, there's a whole host of things. So do you want to go ahead and describe that framework that you use as our VP for Operations and Safety?
Thank you, Patty. And I think what's important to note is we do not have a percentage positivity rate that would trigger us to go remote. We track multiple numbers, availability of PPEs, supply chain issues, other issues that might cause us to make that decision that's apart from just the positivity rate. The other thing is to look at what's the cause of that positivity rate. We have a higher number of positive cases right now, but since many of them are coming through the quarantine process, that risk on campus is not as great as what it had been in the past. So for example, last night we had 8 new positives. Of those 8 new positives, 6 of them were in quarantine. So we actually really only had 2 students new, one off, one on, that's now in that quarantine there. So we do not have a set number that would trigger us to go to remote.
Thank you. And another question related is our capacity for quarantine beds in UVM. What is that capacity? And I know you also have strategies to support quarantine.
Yeah. So we have combined capacity at maximum of 230 beds on campus.
Thank
for both
you.
Isolation and quarantine.
Right, and we've made some major steps between fall and spring to really manage those sites so that students have a positive experience, and as you can when you are in quarantine or isolation, and to support them. So thank you for that, Gary, and to the entire team and Michelle Pavola and the Student Health Services. Thank you, Jay, for posting the National Center for Faculty Development and Diversity online. Susie Comerford. Susie, thanks for this question. Why do we have a part-time CTL leader? Is part-time common for R1 institutions? We're not at R1 yet. That is our goal. But I know Jim and I've talked about this a lot. And Jim, do you want to share your perspective and where you're trying to get and how you look at the total staffing of that program?
Yeah, thank you for that question, Susie. It's actually a model that's worked well for us in the past because the feeling is that, you know, to be a good mentor and advisor to faculty, it's ideal to have your boots on the ground, right? So being an active teacher at the time that you're leading this center, rather than someone who, you know, taught 20 years ago and has been an administrator for all that time. So it's worked for us in that context where people can retain their faculty appointment and maybe get some a small amount of teaching release so they can dedicate their service to the center. Whether that's the model that other institutions use, it's all over the place. Some do, and some have full-time directors. But of course, they have much bigger centers and a much larger faculty body than UVM. So we are actually looking at options for the future, but I think for the time being, this is again a proven model it's been fruitful, and I think in the short term we'll continue with it.
Thanks so much, Jim, and thanks, Susie, for that question. There is a question, Jim, that comes again about the NCFDD. People agree, great programs, some cost money, and there's supposed to be a way to ask for institutional support, and we are very supportive of professional development for our faculty. The question is, how about non-tenure track faculty? Would they be eligible to participate and access support?
Yes, all faculty are eligible for this membership. And in fact, I should actually add, also, and so are graduate students and postdocs. So if you have grad students and postdocs, please encourage them to activate their membership, because this is really, it's really a great opportunity for these folks who are sort of at the early stages of their career. In terms of funding for some of the activities that are not covered by the membership, you know, professional development funds can be used for that, especially in a year like this one where travel is restricted. And for non-tenure track folks, certainly they have access to PDF funds as well. And even part-time faculty, there is a PDF professional development funds specifically for part-time faculty. Unlike the regular PDF where you have to request the funds from your department chair or your associate dean, for the part-time faculty, the request comes to the Office of the Provost, specifically to me. So we do have a fund for that. If you see an opportunity that you want to take advantage of, just submit a request.
Thank you, Jim. And we do have things on your webpage that identify how people can fill out a form and make requests for certain things and support from some of the funds we have. All right, I think the next two questions are going to be for Gary. For students in quarantine, are there services and online kinds of support specifically for them to keep them engaged? If so, where can I get the information to communicate with them? Really good question and an important one, and I know that this is really important to us so that students feel like they are connected in quarantine. Anything you want to share, Gary, in that area?
Yeah, so you're right, that is a concern we have, and we do not offer programming specifically for students in quarantine and isolation, but they have available to them all the virtual programming that's available to all of our students on campus. We have all sorts of support staff in the building available to work with them. We have a nurse there, we have the student ambassadors, we check in regularly with them, we do medical checks, we work with our university dining service partners to provide their meals twice daily. We put refrigerators in all the rooms so that we made a modification to our meal delivery because what we found is students, we were delivering 3 meals a day, but they weren't coming to get their breakfast. They slept in. What we're doing now is we deliver a breakfast with a dinner, and they can store it in their refrigerators in there. So I think we've done a pretty good job to provide support services in there. We're going to be putting up a web page with more specific details, answering questions about how the check-in, check-out process. We provide them a welcome pack, which has information and some fun stuff as well to make that experience as helpful as possible. They're still able to continue in their classes. If they, we give them a call, let them know we're picking them up. We tell them to bring things like their laptop so that they can continue to take their courses remotely. There's internet access there, so it should be a fairly supportive environment for them to continue to be successful. And the question about the average number of close contacts, I don't have that, but I would say that it ranges. We've had some occasions, and it's mentioned in the letter we sent out last night, that there have been some social gatherings that have resulted in 10 or 12 people as close contacts. I would say more typically it's on the lower end. It's 2 or 3 people that are close contacts.
Thank you so much, Gary. And I wanted to add for the students, your question is a good one. We do encourage them to utilize UVM board because there's several activities on UVM board that they can actually engage in. The Center for Health and Wellbeing also has activities where they can do yoga or mindfulness virtually, so they can do that in their rooms. The other thing is, since they have their computers and they're in your classes, you can call them via Teams and just check in with them. You can send them an email via Teams. You can do a face-to-face call just to check in on them, and I know students really do appreciate that. All right. The next one, a question is if faculty teaching in-person classes knows that one of their students has tested positive for COVID, but the faculty has not been contacted through contact tracing, is there someone the faculty member can contact if they are concerned? Gary, how do you want to answer that one?
I would suggest they email Student Health Services and let them know they have a concern, and somebody can get back and contact them to talk about it and address the concern you have. Our contact tracers do a great job of identifying exactly what needs to be questioned in the students and then identifying those people. So if you've not been identified, it's because a conclusion was made that you were not identified as a close contact.
And I do have, Gary and I spend a lot of time talking with Mark Levine, our Commissioner of Health, and his entire team. They have some extraordinary contact tracers, and they've educated me in a lot of ways in terms of what it means to be a close contact. But I think Gary's suggestion is a good one if you have concerns. It looks like we don't have any additional questions at this point, but I do want to just give any of our panelists any additional time to offer some insights or thoughts. I know, Jay, you are teaching this semester as I am, and I believe you have a mixed class like mine, if I'm not mistaken. How are you finding being able to connect your in-person students and your students who are online? And I can talk about what I'm doing as well, but any tricks of the trade that you've learned to keep the students engaged?
Yeah, I think every class is different, and the one that I'm teaching this semester is particularly unique. I can say that I learned so much from colleagues who had at-home students, in particular in the fall, and thought ahead and was able to mail my museum students some objects to curate so that they can do all the curation exercises at home. So that was something that was really helpful that I learned from other folks. We've also learned that rather than trying to set up a computer in a space that does not have a technology setup, it works really well just to have my at-home students on the telephone. And as long as I'm mindful of what they can hear, they're able to engage and join the class in that manner. So I will say that in designing my class and thinking about each class, I'm always mindful of how the at-home students can be part of what everyone else is doing, how they can be part of the discussion, whether it's the online portion of the class or the in-person portion of the class. But I will also say it's so incredible to be back in the classroom with students who are just very excited to have the opportunity to do hands-on work that is really difficult to do virtually. So I'm grateful that I have that opportunity, and I've really tried to communicate to the students that I am grateful that I have that opportunity to be there, in the hope that it'll foster an appreciation in them as well for this very unique opportunity.
Thank you, Jay. I'm finding the same things. I have a handful of students who are in the classroom. I'm actually finding that they are wonderful supporters and helpers of the at-home students, because they want to make sure that the students can see me and they can see the students while they're also seeing videos. We're finding having an opportunity to talk about videos using the breakout rooms and having the in-class students connect with the at-home students has really been very valuable. And then they're doing online discussion forums, but they're mixed up, so it's not just the in-person students and the at-home students, it's a cross-pollination of the students, and they've really enjoyed that. So it's given me an appreciation for all of our faculty and everything that we do, a total appreciation of ETS and all the technology. I'm in a really fancy classroom that has great technology. I teach on Wednesday nights from 5 to 8 or 5:05 to 8:05. And I have a wonderful classroom producer who actually is taking the class as well, which is a significant advantage. So, and I've learned a lot from listening to other colleagues. I know, Jim, your CTL colleagues actually helped do the tour for me and taught me all kinds of tricks to use to make sure that I was engaging students. So thank you for all the work that you're supporting in CTL.
Patty?
Yes, go ahead, Gary.
Yeah, so I wanted to get back to the earlier question that came up about vaccine and travel restrictions, and I posted the response from the Agency of Commerce and Community Development that is a site where you go about travel questions. I pasted that information, but also the link, and people who have been vaccinated and also people who have tested positive still need to follow all of the travel requirements and restrictions.
Thank you, Gary, for that quick follow-up. I understand that we'll know more in about a month or so about, you know, the value add of people who've had COVID and get the vaccine and people who haven't had COVID and get the vaccine and what it means. But right now, we're still doing everything that we're supposed to do until we have more data, and the data is coming in. I think the good news is what we are hearing from our medical experts is that the vaccines are hopefully going to decrease hospitalizations, deaths, and severity of illness, and that's what we want. But it's likely that masking will continue to be an important component, and it probably, as Gary and I said, helps us with other flus and viruses as well. And it may not be next fall 6-foot distancing, but it's not going to be crowded classrooms. So we're going to be thinking about how we can support the continued safety, but giving people the opportunity to connect, which we know is really important. And we're hearing from our families and students that mental health and finding other ways to connect with them is really important. I think I am going to give you all the gift of time. We're at 12:45, but I know there's nothing better for a faculty member than to have 15 minutes to actually eat your lunch, make a phone call that you've put off, or just sit and do some mindfulness so that you can get through the rest of your day. I want to thank my panelists for all their efforts, and Gary and his team for continuing to keep us safe. And clearly the University Event Services, they are just awesome. Justin, Roya, Josh, everybody, thank you for what you do. And before we end, anything else any of the panelists want to say? Okay, We are good to go, and thank you all. We will be posting the Teams live event and our Q&A for you in the next week, and our faculty digest will be coming out tomorrow. So thank you all and have a great weekend.